About to start with the Q&A, and Thandi would be facilitating that. And so please start sending your questions, even if you were to use it on the send your question via the chat box. Rather, raise your hand here, then we'll be able to engage with you. We have very little time, so let's start asking those questions. Do I see a hand, Thandi? Do you see anything? I'm handing it over to you.
Thanks very much, Hopewell. I don't see any questions that have come through at the moment. I'm just double checking. But I think just to while we're waiting for any questions or comments to come through, to thank Azola and Jean for their presentations. I think it just goes to show how the extent of the sort of disinformation and challenges that we have been dealing with, and what to look out for in the coming period. I also wanted to touch on two elements, and I'm filling time here while we're waiting for any questions or comments. But in particular with Real 411, as Azola mentioned, we are running it in partnership with the IEC for the election period. And so in addition to that process that Azola defined, any election-related disinformation that comes through the system will be sent through to the IEC and reviewed by the IEC. And if action needs to be taken, it will then be taken within the electoral framework. So there is that additional step for during the election period for action to be taken there. So if you look at Real 411, you will see that there's recently been an election portal added there. In addition to that, I know that SANEF is running their elections dashboard, and also as a stakeholder to the process, you'll be able to find Real 411 resources there as well. I have seen a hand raised. Ayanda, do you want to go ahead?
Thank you very much, Ms. Smith. I just wanted to ask a question, or just basically make a comment and then ask a question on part of your slide, Ms. Smith, about credibility in journalism. And part of the problem that I have when it comes to credibility within journalism is the fact that we ourselves are not necessarily diverse. A lot of the time, I'm a freelance journalist. I work for myself. I don't work for any organization. And I think part of the problem is that a lot of the time, journalists are expected to work for a credible organization or to actually freelance for one. And with the unemployment rates that we've seen in our country, journalists are not exempt from that. We are also affected by this unemployment. And so the work that we then produce is also affected by what is happening in our society. And it's a problem then, especially when it comes to issuing actual physical credibility in the form of a press card, in the form of a community press card. This also affects the way that we do our work and the way that we put our information out. So the question that I have then is how do we as journalists, especially if you are freelancing, overcome that? Because, you know, I've been on the Spotters Network and I've now graduated to be part of the Real 411. Yes. And, you know, this is all, it's all well and good and great, but there's definitely more that can be done. And this is speaking to SANEF as well. You know, it's a struggle if you're a journalist working for yourself to get credit, to get accreditation, to get accredited, to be a part of, to be a member. If you don't know anybody who's part of these quote unquote lawful organizations. And that's not to say that you know, working for yourself is not something that's credible, but these organizations gatekeep a lot. It's true. It's very gatekeeping, and it's also it stifles our work. It really does, and it also stifles the quality of information that we bring to the forefront if you don't have those resources. So yeah, that's basically the question that I have. Especially this goes to SANEF as well. How do you overcome that, especially as young journalists or journalists who are starting out in the industry, not working for organizations? We basically do this ourselves. I freelance just for a small radio station. I'm not getting paid for it, but it's something that I do in order to further my career. So it's very difficult. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say.
All right, thanks for that. I'm just checking if there are other questions, and then we'll take 2 or 3 questions together and respond to that. But really important issues raised. I do see that 1 or 2 questions come in through the chat. So we've got a question. So we'll have the same issues with elections as we do with vaccinations. People choose what information they want to believe, and political parties have already started with the allegations of bias. How do we counter that? Also, very important question. I see that 3, I'm just checking. How can newsrooms tap into the disinformation investigations done by DFR Lab and other disinformation fact-checking organizations? So, Jean, I don't know if you want to take that, and then I can address the one other, and Azola, if you have any comments, we'll come to you. And then I know we do need to wrap up in the next couple of minutes, but yeah, Jean, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of getting in touch with DFR Lab, I mean, we've got a website. I've got a social media account. My colleague Thandi, he's got a social media account as well. You're more than welcome to reach out at any stage, even if it's just via DM. Before we're done, I'll drop my email address in the chat as well. So if you do come across something, you see anything that might look suspicious, or you're not sure, or you'd like perhaps some guidance on a specific project you're working on, you're more than welcome to get in touch. Part of our kind of core deliverables is engaging with journalists and capacitating people to, replicate and do the work that we do. So, apologies. Always happy to work with journalists. I mean, there's lots of things that you guys are doing that we don't and we can't necessarily do. I mentioned earlier, just one example is the on the ground speaking with people, actually using your own sources. And if we can augment that with some of the digital side of things that we do, we're always happy to work together. I'd see a little bit earlier, Isak did make a mention of that slide about the Zuma children. And this could kind of tie in with the question from Janet as well about people believing what they want to believe. The short clip, and you guys will see that in the presentation once it's uploaded. Something you often find during case or situations of political upheaval is these fake accounts created in the name of specific politicians. They're not listed as parody accounts, but if you take a good hard look at some of those accounts, you'll be able to pick out that they are in fact a parody of the individual. Both the Duduzane Zuma Twitter account, there's a very large one with almost 200,000 followers. That account isn't Duduzane Zuma's. It's an old Black First, Land First account that was active during the Gupta period that's been rebranded into the Duduzane Zuma's account. Similarly, there was a Duduzile Sambundla Zuma account that was doing the same kind of stuff. It was also very politically active. And all of this is just to kind of gain a large following and gain a lot of social media traction. And it's purely for ideology. So there's lots of politicking going on around those particular accounts.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Jean. So then for me, just to touch on some of the issues that Ayanda raised, and yes, I think that, we forget the kind of environment, or we often overlook the kind of environment and the industry that journalists are working under. And the fact that we've not only been dealing with the challenges of reporting on COVID-19, the very sort of the kind of obsession we have with politics, and that just the sort of nature of the narratives that we've seen, but the very real challenges that journalists have on a very practical level. We can't forget the financial constraints, the industry constraints and challenges that the industry is facing. We're dealing with shrinking newsrooms. We're dealing with, journalists well, media themselves struggling with resources, which does make it all the more challenging for freelance journalists to operate. But also the challenges that you've mentioned, Ayanda, aren't. I mean, these have been existing for years around freelance journalism, and I think what is important to just touch on is when we talk about credibility. Well, for me at least, it is it is a bit of a different concept to accrediting journalists. Yes, that's sort of one aspect when looking at credibility, but in this context, when we're talking about public trust and disinformation and being a source that the public can turn to, we're talking more to the issues of quality journalism, issues of how journalists produce their work, and really the quality of the content produced. So although the issues that you do raise, and if there is someone from SANEF who would like to also weigh in on this, I think that would be great. But when we talk about credibility in this context, I think it is more to do with producing content and operating in a sense, or in a way where you can build that public trust. And that's also, yes, it's an individual journalist responsibility, but it also speaks more to the newsroom generally, and the public trust that needs to be built up within or for those institutions. I think we can have a whole big discussion on individual journalists and newsrooms and the challenges that the two have, or the different challenges that go along with that. But I think especially in this group, really important issues to raise. So if there is anyone else, I know we are quite a small group at the moment, we've got a few minutes left, but if anyone else wants to touch on those issues, I think we can have 2 more minutes for discussion.
Maybe, Thandi, if I can quickly just jump on the comment that Janet Whitten made about people choosing what information they want to believe. I think that's a very good point that she makes there. It's very difficult to try and convince people to believe something they don't want to. There's an inherent confirmation bias in all of us, about believing what we want to believe. It ties into the way we were brought up, the things we were taught to believe as we were growing up. And it's very difficult to get rid of those biases as you grow up. And social media platforms are built to exploit that. They try to keep you engaged for as long as possible. And to do that, they keep on showing you content that confirms things that you believe in. If you log into Facebook and you keep on seeing things you don't agree with, eventually you're just going to stop logging on. They know this, so they keep showing you and keep kind of pulling you into this echo chamber that echoes what you already believe. So if you're an anti-vaxxer, you will start seeing more and more anti-vaccine content, to the extent that you pretty much believe that this is the situation, this is the way the world is. And trying to get people out of that is extremely difficult. There's lots of behavioral science behind it. There's things that go way above my understanding. But simply trying to bash people with the facts is sometimes not even useful. We've seen it quite a lot. There's actually quite a large pushback against fact checkers because of that. If you start doing any kind of fact checking, immediately there are these accusations of being funded by big pharma, or being, George Soros is involved and you're getting instructions from him directly, and so on. So that's a very, very good point that you make. And it's something that, as a broader issue in society, it's something we need to look at, is how do we, I almost want to say, pull back in the lost sheep? How do we engage these people in a way with, a bit of compassion. I mean, unfortunately, my default stance, because I've seen so much of this, is to be aggressive when I engage with these individuals. And often that's not the way to convince them. It polarizes it even further. There has to be a conversation about how do we get people through compassion, through empathy and understanding to, listen to the same message and see the truth again. It's that's probably for me one of the saddest things about social media is the way that it's polarized us on issues on which we previously weren't polarized at all. It's kind of just exacerbated a lot of those fault lines in our society along various different ways.
Azola, do you want to add something before we wrap up? We are almost closing. On Real 411, I saw a bit of a question that says, yeah, that touches on how we report this.
I didn't see that question, Hopewell, but I wanted to give perhaps an example of an online. I saw something about an online disinformation, something that has an example basically of journalist harassment online. And I wanted to give the example of Julius Malema versus Karima Brown in 2019, if I remember properly, when he shared on his Twitter a screen grab with Karima Brown's cell phone number. And after that, she received a host of death threats, rape messages threatening her of rape and those kind of things. So it also falls under journalist harassment and can be indeed reported on Law 411. But that is just an example of online harassment that has consequences offline. I also remember Ranjeni Munusami and I think Farrell Hafaji, who found it difficult to leave their homes because of the kind of messages that they received from people on Twitter. And then for Ranjeni herself, she was assailed at the shop where a shopper came up to her, told her off, sworn at her, and those kind of things, which start online but have real consequences offline, to a point where people stop being who they are because of these kind of things. And being who they are, I mean by being good investigative journalists.
I think one could mention more examples, really, because City Press has had a lady where Somizi put a number, and his followers started harassing her because she was asking about their relationship. Somizi and the partner, and also the journalist from the Sunday World, who also was insulted and called all sorts of names. So it affects everyone, really, particularly through the social media, which is why, in ending, ladies and gentlemen, and thanking these wonderful speakers, and wrapping up, we want to say thank you so much, guys, for sharing with us your information. It's valuable, and I hope you'd be available, particularly Jean, to assist journalists, as you did offer, that when they come and say this and that, you'll be able to sort of show them the guidelines of how to move forward. Azola, please, when you are being approached to say we have this case and so on, we ourselves try to sort of put this often on social media and say, if you are a journalist and you've been harassed, please log your complaint here so that it gets investigated by Real 411. So we'll be working closely with you. And this information will be discussed further, I think on September 21, when we have a webinar on the safety of journalists on and offline. This is where we will deal with cyberbullying. We'll deal with all these kinds of intimidation tactics that you face, including how to deal with the police when you are being stopped from doing your work, how to deal with the political organizations when they are stopping you from doing your work. So this will be the next kind of a webinar where we will be training you journalists and sharing with you tips of how to navigate through these difficult and challenging times on issues of reporting elections, because it's no longer a straightforward matter. It now have to come with all sorts of techniques of how, and skills of how to survive this terrain. So we are hoping, ladies and gentlemen, that you would join us on the 21st, and we will be bringing to you other skilled and experienced trainers to assist you navigate through these coming elections. And I want to thank you so much, Thandi. We work with you all the time. Oh, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, the media monitoring Africa, it's such a very interesting relationship with SANEF, because they also monitor the media, members of SANEF who are editors. They monitor whether we are doing our work well, but also we just don't end there. We also have a relationship where we get to share these kinds of experiences. Hence, Thandi and her colleague are with us in this webinar to kind of show that it is not a relationship that is adversary, but it is about working together and sharing skills and expertise so that we empower one another. I want to thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for taking time and joining us. I also want to say that I hope to see you at the next coming webinar. I think we've just managed to wrap up. We really appreciate your time. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.